Ever since the magical 2019 season, things just haven't been right at LSU. And I think that Brian Kelly coming in changes that. I believe that this is a team with too much talent to continue to struggle. A team that has been recruiting really well and already with Brian Kelly, but a team that has NFL talent on their roster. It just can't be like this forever. And with the team that they have returning, the talent that they have on both sides of the football, there's some questions about certain positions. But I think this is a team that can challenge teams in 2022, take a step forward. Now, I don't believe this could be a team that's going to challenge in Alabama for a division title or a conference championship or Georgia, those teams. But I think that you're going to see a step forward. And we're going to talk about 10 guys today that are going to make that happen. Obviously, with Brian Kelly coming in, that makes things a little bit better with his success at Notre Dame and Cincinnati at his previous stops. But this is a team that has the talent to turn things around. And with the transfer portal, too, I really like where this team is headed. Keishawn Boutte has already been picked as a wide receiver one for the NFL draft by many analysts, and it's easy to see why. It's just a natural playmaker. He knows what he's doing, knows how to run routes, he knows how to create space, and he knows what to do in space, too. As soon as he gets the football, he is looking to get to the end zone, and a lot of teams don't know how to guard him. It just comes down to, can he play a full season? Is he going to be able to play a full season? And in this new offense, is he going to be able to thrive? I think that he can, and I think that it's going to be fun to see what he can do, like I said, with a full season and in Brian Kelly's new system. This is a playmaker that a lot of people would love to have, and the fact that LSU has him returning, and this wide receiver core for LSU is going to be an underrated group. I think they have a ton of talent, and if they're able to utilize them in the right aspect and the right way, I think that this is an offense you're going to not love facing on a weekly basis. Flipping to the defense, this is where most of the talent, if you will, is going to be that everybody knows. And it starts with BJ Ojolari. 12 tackles for loss, 7 sacks last year. He is a potential NFL draft pick at the next, not potential, he's going to be an NFL draft pick. You look at what he can do, his length, his power, his speed. It's going to be fun to see how he can add on to that, a season in which he had a good year and one that I hope that he can capitalize on even more. One of the bigger additions in the transfer portal for LSU was Jarek Bernard Converse from Oklahoma State, had a big year for them, 51 tackles, 11 passes defended. He's going to be a player that, again, this secondary is going to look very different. You had Derek Stingley last year, and now you're going to have essentially 3 new starters for sure. And that's something that it could be all 4, actually, if you include Seven Banks, someone who I think is probably not going to be on this list, but could be at the end of the year. But Bernard Converse, look at what they did at Oklahoma State. Obviously, with Jim Bowles leaving, that kind of led him to believe that he wanted to go elsewhere. And he ends up at LSU. I think it's a good fit for him. And it's going to be, he's going to find out pretty quick if he can handle SEC competition, because this is a conference that boasts a number of talented receivers. And that is going to be something that tests him week in and week out. And I think that he has the talent to compete with those guys. But it's just going to be, it might be a little bit of a curve right away, but he's a talented player who I think can handle that. Mason Smith is one of those underrated players, probably under the radar for a lot of people at defensive tackle. 19 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, and 4 sacks. Those are pretty good numbers for a defensive tackle. A lot of LSU fans really like what they see from him. They think that he's going to be a phenomenal talent for this team. And Brian Kelly's teams have had pretty good defenses in the past. You have pretty talented players on defense, and Mason Smith is going to be one of those players that opens things up for the guys around him, but also can be disruptive in his own regard. He's going to be someone who can get in the backfield. And like I said, 5 tackles for loss for a defensive tackle is pretty good. You're not going to see crazy numbers from defensive tackles, but a guy like that is too talented to contain for too long, and you're going to see that on a weekly basis for LSU. If Ali Gay can stay healthy for an entire season, I am thrilled about the results that LSU can get from him. In 4 games, he had 19 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, and 2.5 sacks. Now put that to a full season, and those would be numbers that could put him in the top 2, top 3. This is a guy who has the talent there at defensive end. If he and BJ Ojolari can be healthy the entire season, that's going to be an edge rushing duo that you don't want to face. The offensive tackles are going to have nightmares, because when you think, oh, well, I don't have to face Ojolari, then you have to face Gay, and that's a problem for anybody that's trying to have an easy night. It's going to be a defense that, again, if healthy, is very disruptive, has the potential to be disruptive, and there are players that, like I said, can make a difference on a weekly basis and compete in a conference that's full of talented players. Safety Joe Fausha comes from Arkansas, and it's one of the two Arkansas safeties that they're going to get. I'm really excited to see how he fits in this LSU offense. We know that he can handle playing in the SEC. That's not a question. It just comes down to, can he fit in the system? Can he understand the system? And I think that you're going to see a player who has got the versatility to do a little bit of everything. 72 tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss, 5 passes defended, 1 interception. He does a little bit of everything, or did a little bit of everything for Arkansas. Now, Arkansas played a little bit more laid back approach in terms of defense, not necessarily like just let everything fly, but it was more of a keep everything in front of you and see what happens. So I'm interested to see, now that he's not in that kind of scheme, what can he do in a scheme that doesn't allow him to sit back. Now, obviously, it wasn't like he was just waiting for things to happen, but it's a different system, and I'm interested to see how he transitions to that. His teammate Greg Brooks Jr. is in the same boat though, so it's another guy who did a little bit of everything for the Arkansas defense, and now comes into a system that is, again, a little bit different. They're going to ask them to do a little bit different things, and it's just going to be a different mentality. Not to say that they weren't trying to be aggressive at Arkansas, but you're looking at a group that just rallied to the football, and LSU is going to probably be a little bit more aggressive than that. Linebacker is probably going to be a position of strength for the LSU defense. Micah Baskerville is in this spot for me. You could pick Mike Jones Jr. if you wanted, but I really like what Baskerville can do, and I don't think a lot of people are talking about him because, again, this is a conference with a ton of talent, so you really have to stand out if you want people to talk about you. Micah Baskerville had 83 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, and 2 sacks last year, which is pretty good for a Tigers defense that, like I said, has talent just like the rest of their conference. But again, you have to do exceptional things to stand out. Sometimes that's okay if you're not doing that, though, because if you're playing consistently like he's capable of doing, and then I think that your defense will be just fine. You don't need an exceptional play all the time, but you're definitely going to have to take a step forward if you're going to compete in a conference full of talent. One of the biggest potential breakout candidates in all of college football is John Emery Jr. Did not play in 2020 for academic reasons. And if he can stay on the field, I think a lot of people are excited about his potential. And I think when you look at the system that he joins with Brian Kelly, you look at the running backs that Brian Kelly's produced. I mean, Kyron Williams is the most recent one. That's really exciting if you're an LSU fan, because John Emery Jr. is a former 5-star player that can really be a monster. They've had guys like Leonard Fournette. They've had other guys come through. You even look at Davis Price last year. You're looking at a team that didn't have a stud necessarily, but he emerged and showed that he could be a thrilling talent for them. And I think that's really exciting for anybody who's running the football for LSU. And John Emery Jr. probably has as much talent as anybody they've seen run the football in this program. It just comes down to if he's able to stay on the field, and then is he able to figure out Brian Kelly's system and be that elite back that everybody expects him to. Final one on the list is Miles Brennan. I like Miles Brennan better than Jaden Daniels. I think he's a more consistent player, just needs to stay healthy. If you look back at what he was doing in 2019, and even, he didn't play last year, but look what he did in 2019. This is a guy who was slinging it. And this was the year after they were playing, that would have been 2020. This was a year after they won the national championship. It was one of the best seasons we've ever seen from any team and any quarterback from Joe Burrow. So over 1,100 yards in just a handful of games, 11 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. I just don't know if he's going to fit in Mike Denbrock's system better than Jaden Daniels will, so that is a big factor that will play into that. But I think that Miles Brennan is really, really good. I think that he is more than capable of leading this team, and I like him in terms of consistency more than Jaden Daniels. So if you want to put Jaden Daniels here, that's fine. But in the end, it comes down to, this is a team with a ton of talent. They hammered the transfer portal to bring in players to compete, especially on the line, offensive line, but also in the secondary. So if that works out, this is going to be a tough team to beat, and it just comes down to playing more consistently, something that I know Brian Kelly is going to address right away.